Everybody, my name is Donovan Roberts, and today we're going to be talking about the forensic investigation techniques, best practices, and recommendations, and really going in an in-depth level and really discussing a full, broad explanation and recommendations on how to be effective in conducting a forensic investigation. So before we dive deep, I do want to kind of go over just a brief introduction to forensic investigation and kind of breaking it up into three different parts. The very first thing is going to be soft skill proficiency. These are things that it really anybody could have, whether you're in forensic investigations or not. These are things that you could transferable skills from other roles into being a digital forensic investigator. Stuff like strong communicating, critical thinking, problem solving are all going to be effective skills to have when it comes to forensic investigations. The second thing is going to be the evidence collection. So this is really important because you need to have proper techniques and procedures for collecting, handling, and preserving the physical and digital evidence at a crime scene. And then lastly, the documentation and reporting. This is a very meticulous process. Um, and it's really going to include a lot of detailed notes, chain of custody, just a lot of things that people really need to take into consideration and be very detail oriented to ensure that the process is going properly. So let's kind of talk a little bit more about soft skills for forensic presentations. I mentioned communication. This is going to be really, really important because not only are you going to have to obviously communicate within the evidence gathering and things like that, but oftentimes digital forensics investigators have to step on a stand and be able to communicate clearly something that may be extremely complex to the regular person, but be able to explain that fluently so their audience understands. Also, too, of course, critical thinking, being able to analyze evidence, identify relevant facts, and really to be able to draw logical conclusions based off of a number of different things as far as evidence goes to kind of point and build this narrative that they're trying to build in the investigation. And lastly, of course, attention to detail. When you're dealing with evidence, digital evidence, there's a lot of things that you need to be aware of, not only with the evidence itself, but also the process of gathering, collecting, and preserving the evidence takes a lot of attention to detail. Next, I want to talk about the evidence collection and documentation. So you can see here it's broken up into six different steps. So of course, the very first thing you want to do is secure the scene, establish this for this instance, it is kind of talking about really all sorts of crime in a way. But of course, establishing a secure perimeter. And this is even goes into digital collection of evidence. I mean, you don't want people to have access to computers, phones, hard drives, software, and things like that to be able to contaminate the digital evidence. From there, of course, you're going to carefully identify and collect all the evidence, including trace evidence, fingerprints, documents, digital data, really anything that you could use to kind of go into building up your case. And oftentimes, when it comes to the identifying and collecting of evidence, a lot of digital forensic investigators make copies of the original data and then work with that copy. You never want to just start manipulating that original copy because you could mess up something in that process, and then your overall case could then become invalid because of that. Of course, you're going to want to document everything as well as you go. Maintaining chain of custody, that's a super important part of digital forensics. Making sure that, from point A to point B, as an investigator, you don't want to take something to your personal house or leave it in your car overnight because then there starts to be holes in the investigative process. Somebody could have tampered with it. You just never know. And then, of course, properly packaging and labeling evidence. And then lastly, of course, is the transport and storing of evidence securely. Making sure original copies are secure. All of that goes into building up a solid case. So here is a couple of investigative techniques too that I wanted to um, take note of. Again, some of this goes into just general crime scene stuff, but it's all encompassing as well into the digital forensics. So of course, analyzing, the actual scene where you're collecting computers, hard drives, things like that. Of course, if there's any witnesses or, anybody that you could talk to, owners of the devices, or, figuring out, if there's deleted messages, figuring out those people and getting those people in for interviews. Of course, that's a part of the process. Of course, the main focus here, digital forensic analysis, going over computers, smartphone, phones, storage media, and even also forensic accounting as well, investigating financial records of transactions, all of those things, all of the money stuff nowadays is all digitalized. So that to me is going to fall under digital forensics as well. And then the ballistic analysis, of course, that's going a little bit out of the scope of today's topic, but again, that is something that is important as far as the investigation goes. So here is a comparison of key compatibilities across popular digital forensic tools. And as you could see, I mean, you have data recovery. Of course, it's going to be a major one. Data is going to, tell you a story. You're going to have artifact analysis, of course, analyzing hard drives and computers, phones, network forensics, mobile forensics, and cloud forensics. You're getting into, analyzing, the network, possibly analyzing packets that are being sent back and forth. Mobile forensics and nowadays really you see as the third most popular thing. Phones are a major part of digital forensics, whether you're tracking people's locations, GPS data, text data, search history data, things of that nature. So here too is a little bit digging in more about the procedures and protocols. So of course, as we know, there's a handful of different protocols that go into digital forensics. From there, of course, like I mentioned before, wanting to maintain a chain of custody, that's really, really important. From there, adhering to quality assurance. So of course, making sure that there's control measures. I think the biggest thing that we've learned is really making a copy of whatever the digital evidence that you're taking, making a copy of that, and then digging into the copy and not messing with the original thing. Utilizing validated techniques. Of course, there's a standard board of techniques that need to be used. And then, ensuring that there's objective reporting and that your reporting is backed by scientific methods, that are accepted within the industry. You don't want to go in and, start making things up, or, creating your own way of doing things that isn't well studied or backed by the forensics community. Also too, lastly, well, not lastly, but one of the end marks, outside of just the investigation, but a lot of these, digital forensic investigators have to take the stand, and like I mentioned before, need to be able to speak fluently and really speak in a way that non-forensic people, non-tech people can understand what they've done, how they've done it, and why it's important, and what story is it telling. So that's going to be really important, to be really audience specific in your presentations, and making sure that everybody is in the know in regards to your overall, not only just the data, that the evidence you've collected, but the process of that entire thing. Like we mentioned, ensuring the quality of the data, chain of custody, all those things, and be able to communicate fluently with your audience. So key takeaways as we wrap up here, again, comprehensive knowledge of forensic procedures. That's going to be a major thing. A lot of times with the digital forensic stuff, you're not going to see a lot of just, that's not an entry level thing. It takes years to be able to kind of understand the procedures and make sure that you're following them properly. Of course, being able to have attention to detail and meticulous with documentation, chain of custody, making copies of things, pretty much recording each and every step that you do in your investigative process. Also collaboration and an interdisciplinary approach. Oftentimes with digital forensics and really any forensics, there's times where you're partnering up with different law enforcement agencies and things like that. You need to be able to collaborate with a number of different individuals and entities to make sure that the process goes smoothly. And then, of course, continuous training and skill development. That's always critical, not just in this, but really in any field, making sure that you're staying on point as far as your training and skill development, especially in a world like digital forensics, computers, phones. I mean, these are rapidly evolving. Even in the past 20 years, we've gone leaps and bounds as far as the technology that we have accessible now. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. Again, my name is Donald Roberts. That was a brief overview of the forensic investigation techniques, best practices, and recommendations. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.